tomorrow, Maxwell will appear in court as of, we're taping on Thursday, July 9th. And I think one of the big questions I'm trying to wrap my head around was whether she was just a traumatized, seriously, she grew up in a very traumatic home. Her father was a very controversial, extremely wealthy Murdoch's competitor, died mysteriously, also weird ties to Mossad potentially. She felt a lot of trauma learning that her father's empire was a house of cards itself, and not having any money, and people, government seizing her assets immediately after his death. And so coming here and attaching herself to Epstein, I as a human, I think, okay, well, maybe she was vulnerable and blind in some ways, doing all this bidding, finding girls. But what seems, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, was conscious of the extent of the abuse? Was she directly involved in the abuse? And at what length, I guess, in terms of the trafficking? Because there's local trafficking, there's international human trafficking, which have different legal implications. Do you have any sense of this as before we go into these court proceedings?
Sure. And I should say her bail hearing was moved to Tuesday. Prosecutors had originally requested it to be on Friday, but I think given that when she was moved into the Brooklyn federal lockup and everything, they wanted to hold it on Tuesday. So, but, she, according to police in Palm Beach, they had wanted to interview her. According to victims and victims' lawyers, she was directly involved in the abuse, according to them. And I think part of that also is hinted at in the new indictment, which is interesting because it covers a period of time from 1994 to 1997. And that's shortly after she moved to New York. So it seems that meeting Jeffrey Epstein had sort of sealed her fate in a way. She moves to New York and she allegedly becomes involved in the grooming and enticing and recruiting of underage girls. I mean, these were girls as young as 14 years old. So Virginia Giuffre, who was one of the first accusers, one of the first survivors to come forward publicly, with her face and her name and everything. And it should be noted, she was the one who was also allegedly groomed for Prince Andrew. And Ghislaine Maxwell allegedly had a part in that. She had that infamous photo of Virginia Giuffre next to Prince Andrew, and he has his arm around her and her, bare midriff, essentially. You can see Ghislaine Maxwell smiling in the background. I don't think that Ghislaine was somebody who just happened to be there. I think if you speak to victims and, their advocates, Ghislaine was very much a part of this. Mm-hmm. Virginia also said that Ghislaine would take photos of the girls. So there's questions of, does Ghislaine Maxwell have photographic evidence of some of these crimes? Ghislaine Maxwell was accused of taking part in the abuse herself, of taking part in these orgies with underage girls. So, but I have spoken to friends of Ghislaine who feel bad for her, that, she came to New York and had, she came from a damaged background, right? She was trying to pick up the pieces. I'm sure, but there are a lot of people that say she had a silver spoon in her, right? Cry me a river. Why do I care about a rich lady? But I do think that maybe psychologically, she had a lot of issues before she met Epstein. I think that's maybe why they had come together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's the psychological stuff that's really interesting to me, is that he clearly has a history of preying on women, and whether it's, allegedly a 14-year-old girl or Maxwell, who he did date. They also parted ways, am I correct? They had stopped talking for a while, or more recently. Are those reports confirmed? Because I've read that in a few different articles, that she wasn't talking to him anymore or hadn't been interacting with him.
That's unclear. We don't know. But it is interesting that earlier this year, when victims were filing claims against Epstein's estate, Ghislaine had filed one herself saying that Epstein had always promised to take care of her, that she needed money for to hire private security amid all these death threats, and that she needed money because she's had to defend herself in different lawsuits filed by accusers. It's interesting. It's hard to believe that she would have stopped talking to Epstein completely because she was so involved in his world for so long. But that's a good question. I mean, when is the last time she spoke to him? I think, without a doubt, as soon as he was arrested, she probably fled. So
yeah, exactly. Per legal advice, if anything. Kate, really fascinating reporting. Check out Kate's work in the Daily Beast. This story, I don't think it's going to be going away, and hopefully they're keeping her safe. We know we've seen this happen before. So hopefully she's safe and she's healthy, and they're keeping her in a highly watched spot. So we have these answers soon. Thank you for watching and listening to the Nomiki Show. Make sure to click like and subscribe on YouTube and share with everybody on social media. And of course, if you're not a patron already, please join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for as low as $5 a month. That money makes a huge difference. We don't have the corporate money coming in. We're not cable news that's raking in the dough from advertisers right now as everybody's sitting at home and watching. It is really you guys who are keeping us together. So please consider being a patron. And for those of you who have already, we are incredibly grateful to you.